Welcome to the Calibre cast. Today we are continuing our series of real stories from AEC professionals. I'm here today with Kayla Fochtman. Kayla, would you please introduce yourself?
I'm Kayla Fochtman. I have been with Calibre for the last year and been in the industry for about 9 years now. Right now, I'm a project engineer slash project manager.
Awesome. Well, welcome. We're glad to have you. So, I think, what we do as engineers sort of innately has value, just by way of what we're doing for the community. But what makes it really wonderful as a career option is when you can tie your values to the work that you do. So, can you talk to me a little bit about how you tie your values to what you do as an engineer?
Sure. I think a lot of my values actually come from collaboration and wanting to work with a variety of people. And I think it's sort of a misnomer that engineers tend to work individually or maybe certainly in other disciplines. But I think civil and structural engineering in particular are very collaborative. And so it's been a real joy to work with a lot of amazing people in my career, to work on some really interesting projects with some really interesting ideas. I really also value like exploration, growth, adventure, and like learning constantly. And that's certainly something I have experienced in my career. Maybe sometimes even to an annoying amount, given that every project has its own different jurisdiction or different challenges, but it's definitely kept everything very interesting. And I've realized in my adult life that I love the idea of freedom, but I actually kind of need some structure in order to be able to function properly within that. And so I think engineering, in a way, is really good about establishing certain structure through jurisdictional requirements, through project demands, what have you. But at the same time, like allowing for some ability to be creative and have some interesting designs.
Yeah, you talked about sort of the adventure piece. And that's one of the things I remember about you from the very beginning, the first time we talked, is you've just done some amazing adventurous things in your life. So this is totally not related to engineering, but I'm just curious, will you tell us something adventurous that you've done that like you loved or were excited about?
I absolutely love traveling, and so I've done some really interesting things traveling. I visited a friend in Ghana who's doing the Peace Corps. I've traveled throughout Poland by myself, and so I think that's been like really joy in my life is experiencing new things and challenging myself in a lot of different ways. I'm able to add a little bit of that into engineering as well. And it certainly doesn't hurt that I've had some interesting project sites that I've been able to travel to as well.
When you went to Poland, you said you went by yourself?
Yes.
I love that. That's very brave. That's very brave of you. So, switching gears a little bit, I want to talk about something that you've learned. So, can you tell me about a time where something went completely wrong and what you learned from
I had a project where it was a vertical project, so we were doing a lot of renovations within a building and then new drainage systems. And the connection that we were making for the storm system into existing storm infrastructure was marked through like existing plans. However, when it went to construction, we discovered that invert was actually not accurate, or at least the information that we had proved to not be accurate, and that was a higher invert than we were expecting. So, unfortunately, this was when the project was under construction. And so it was a really fast get back to the drawing board. How are we going to reevaluate this? And we ultimately connected to a different place on a different side of the site. But obviously, it was kind of a quick turnaround in order to resolve that issue. It sort of taught me a lot that, like, even if we have the good information, it's always best to back check that as much as possible, to get eyes on the site if possible, as well as just having a really good relationship whenever possible with the construction team. So luckily, that particular project, we had a good relationship with the contractor, and so it was more, from my view, more of a collaborative effort of how are we going to resolve this, rather than necessarily like pointing fingers.
That's such great advice because things happen when you're in construction and in design too. But spending that time upfront to make sure we build a level of trust and understanding, we know how everybody communicates so that if something does go wrong, everybody can huddle in together and solve it instead of, like you said, pointing fingers or something. That's such great advice. So what types of things do you do to form that relationship early on in the project?
I think it's a lot of communication, communicating early and communicating often. I admittedly had some mentors myself that were always big fan of like getting people on the phone. So rather than just going through email or whatever online platform may handle RFIs and submittals, actually communicating with people when possible and trying to actually create like a little bit more of a relationship than just, following up on whatever they're looking for.
That's such great mentorship. That's wonderful to hear. So, speaking of learning and kind of growing early on in your career, our last question here: what advice would you give to your younger self or to a new grad entering the field today?
So I kind of am speaking from, I guess, my own experiences and my own personality that I had a habit of being rather shy and timid when I started, and rather a bit of a yes man to whatever that was requested of me. And so I suppose some of my advice is to my younger self, even, is to don't be afraid to share your ideas. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Everyone's learning and doing your best, seeking out mentors, seeking out people that you trust that can provide that advice, as well as setting boundaries early. Because again, a bit of a yes man myself, and I think it's a lot harder to set boundaries or create a good work life balance later on. And that's something I've kind of been attempting to develop over my career since there's deadlines, since there's a lot of times there's overtime and late nights or what have you. How do we avoid those? How do we set kind of expectations, not even just with the company but with clients, with the team, etc., as to create a like healthier place, as to not burn out, as well as just being a little bit of a perfectionist myself. Obviously we want to do like the best work that we can do, but really prioritizing design intent, prioritizing the important parts in the documents, but not necessarily staying up till midnight trying to, perfect leader placement or something to the effect that is not ultimately going to impact the project.
Yeah, I love that. I think, yeah, it took me a long time to realize that I might think I know what perfect is, but my idea of perfect might not be somebody else's idea of perfect, and both can be right.
Mhm.
So, like you said, there really is no actual perfection. It's what do we need to provide? What's going to be efficient? What's going to be working? And, yeah, how do we balance that in our lives to make sure we're giving ourselves what we need to?
Mhm.
I think that's great.
And especially considering the health of the team. What is that balance of creating a really solid project that we love within the and frame or schedule required of us, and at the same time not burning out the whole team in some pursuit of an unrealistic expectation?
Yeah, totally. I think that's great. Well, this has been a wonderful conversation. Is there anything you want to say to wrap up what we've talked about today?
I just hope that we improve America's infrastructure.
Yes, I think that's a great goal. Lofty and great and attainable.
Yes.
Great. Well, this has been wonderful to chat with you. I think some really great takeaways from Kayla today. Be collaborative, be adventurous, be brave, communicate early and often, and don't be afraid to share your ideas. So thank you for joining us. And yeah, we'll look forward to hearing from our next person on our next episode.